Welcome to the Project Management Happy Hour. Our aim is to share frank and honest discussion about real-world issues in project management, but do it in a way that's not too dry, though it might get a bit salty sometimes. Top Shelf Replay, embracing de-escalation, raising visibility without raising your blood pressure. Welcome to Top Shelf Replay, and it's time for us to revisit an episode that was so good, it deserves to be talked about twice.
We've been doing this here podcast for 8 long years now. And since we reference our earlier episodes all the time, we like to go back to them and find the goodness inside to reshare with you. We originally aired Embracing the Escalation on July 29th, 2018. This was a cute one to listen to. What'd you think?
It really occurred to me how much I wish young, newbie project manager Kim had that resource, because I was so terrified for so many years of escalation. And, I think our approach to say it's just another tool in your toolbox. And sometimes you want it. It can be a very good thing. I just was thinking as I re-listened to this, man, I wish younger Kim had learned that the easy way instead of the hard way.
How do you think you learned it the hard way?
Repeatedly getting stressed out and freaked out about it and finding out it wasn't that bad. Or actually, I think in some cases I probably made it worse by getting stressed out about it and getting uptight and defensive about escalations rather than seeing it as potentially a very productive thing to do.
Okay. Yeah. It's funny because one of the things you say in here is you're like, don't escalate too much. That was like one of the first things you had, which is funny because I find myself truly advocating for the people that I coach to escalate more often. And exactly the way that I talk about it, I find myself saying, hey guys, go tell your boss about that. Like now I think of escalation as a tool that you can leverage to help move your career forward. I think about escalation in terms of visibility, because one of the things you said on the podcast is you were like, man, there's PMs I can give projects to. I love being able to be like, take this. And it's like a bullet you fire off and they never come back. And what I've learned is if you do that too much, people don't promote you. You have to be telling them constantly about what's going on. And I think that there is a strategic way to leverage escalation in a casual way, which is a lot of what we talked about, as a version of visibility that talks about, hey, there's a hard thing coming up. I've got to address this. And then you go address it and you come back and you say, hey, no action needed. I got this thing addressed. And I think I took to heart earlier in my career, never talk to your manager, boss, supervisor again. Make sure you handle everything. And ultimately that ended up, in my opinion, making it harder for me to succeed. I will say I learned a lot of brutal lessons while I did that, but I think that not communicating enough about where I was at makes it harder to make a case to promote you.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's that whole say, do, say loop. You have the last part of that is say what you did.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really important communication, and it's also kind of feeds into trust bricks, right? Because you can't build that trust if you can't say, look, I have now made that commitment, but I met that commitment, and you missed that last part of the feedback loop. So yeah, my perspective changed a little bit since then. That kind of feedback, and including your sponsors, manager, whoever that right person is in the loop, can be really good. You don't have to wait until something bad happens to escalate and keep that communication up. So I agree.
All right, we're going to play this episode for you as it originally aired. And at the end of the original episode, we'll come back with how we've changed since then, including talking about leveraging escalation in different ways if you are looking for a promotion versus not looking for a promotion. In today's show, I want to talk about the scariest phrase we have in the corporate world. I'm ready to escalate.
No!
And I'm here to say, you should say, yes, please, to that statement.
So, Kate, I got to ask, did you write this episode in anger?
I wrote it in excitement after having a great conversation on an escalation at work. I was like, people got to be more into escalation. It's the bee's knees.
All right. So when you talk about escalation, can you clarify that?
Escalation is, for me, just another tool in your project management box. And it's the one that I've seen the best PMs use pretty frequently. And escalation is when you decide to take a decision to someone above you, either your boss, your sponsor, or even an executive sponsor, depending on what's happening in your project.
Yes, it can be very good. When it's time to escalate, a sponsor absolutely should want to get involved. But at the same time, you do have to moderate it, right? Because there's a balance. You are engaged as a project manager to be a leader for your project. So your job is to get the project done. And if you can't get the project done without escalating every time a stakeholder farts, then what are you good for?
Totally agreed.
Yeah. So if you do too much, it's not really a win for me as a sponsor or a PMO manager if that happens too much. In fact, as a PMO manager, I kind of got to admit that some of my favorite PMs were like Stinger missiles. You fire and forget. I put her on that project. I know it's good as done, and I don't need to hear about it unless I have to make a decision that I want to make.
Sure. And perhaps what I mean about using it frequently is that good PMs use escalation effectively at all, right? I think there's too many times when project managers can spin like, oh, right? They get stuck in this like, boop. And I think the best at escalation say, this isn't for me to do. And they perform escalation. They follow escalation techniques.
I guess you can think of escalation another way as forcing your sponsor to be engaged. And arguably, a motivated and engaged and well-managed sponsor can be key to project success.
Right. And really, I think why I had a bug up my butt about this week is because you're not paid enough to deal with some of the things that you'll come up against, right? You'll hit hard problems like, should we spend $100K for a 6-month solution? Or should we accept the low likelihood, high impact risk and work 8 all-nighters and call it good? Like if you're in charge of the livelihood of all of your team members and also have a limited budget, but also need to get stuff done, right? When the situation is messy and there's not a clear answer on the best way forward and that involves a lot of risk or a lot of money, those are the times that I really think we should focus on escalation.
Yeah, that's true. The textbook answer is on this, and I can pretty much quote it because I'm in the middle of teaching another PMP class is, you, number 1, raise a risk. Number 2, if it's an issue and unavoidable, then initiate integrated change control. But PMBOK aside, in either case, that's absolutely does mean in either case that you're escalating to your sponsor or senior stakeholders. They want or they should want to know about it at that point.
We've talked about a lot of different situations so far on the podcast. I'm thinking of a Getting to Yes version where Kim says, I want to buy this house. I don't want to spend any more than $200K. And then that's your project. But then you're like, okay, I could do it for $250K and get all the things he's asking for. But situations like that where like a boss is like, get it done. And they give you some sort of constraint. And then you look at the situation and you say, okay, we can do that. But there's a lot of other things that accompany getting it done in that way. I want to raise it. I want them to understand what's going on with this so that they can choose to make that decision and that we can be clear on what's happening with the project.
This is kind of like your Stupid Executive Asks episode, except they didn't ask, I guess, right?
Right. Yeah. I do think it's really similar. But I think why I wanted to talk about this week is because we've talked about extreme examples, I think, right? Like we're working on crucial conversations and that's, when a conversation is crucial, so there's big stakes there. We've also talked about breaking bad news and had that example where like the whole system broke and you had to work a whole bunch to fix it, right? There's also just times where it's not that it's immediately urgent, but you do have 2 competing priorities that someone needs to make a decision on. And rather than you trying to figure that out as a project manager, identifying this is something for the boss to do, and then raising it to the boss to make that decision is the moment I think I want to focus on.
That's a good one. I sometimes like to think of it as helping the sponsor make the right decision, whether they want to or not, which is sometimes the case. Sometimes you almost kind of need to grab the sponsor and tell them to step up. They're the sponsor. It's their project. They are, quote, paying for it, or they got the money for it, and they're championing it. So they also put you up to this as a project manager. So if they want to get that project done, the PM sometimes need to almost sort of grab them by the scruff of the neck and say, this is a problem, sponsor, and you need to sort it out. And then you can take them and rub their nose in it and say, bad sponsor, naughty. You need to go fix this. Go outside, bad.
Yeah. And I feel like that middle ground, right, where it's not a crisis situation and it's not something that you can handle day to day, because we definitely agree on, that a project manager should feel empowered to make several decisions on their project with all the, you've got your answers to your 5 questions, things like that. But when it's that middle ground that's like, ooh, it's clearly we've got competing priorities here. We're going to escalate this. So how to do it, right? How would we do this in this medium urgency scenario?
How would you do it? She probably wouldn't actually grab them by the scruff of the neck and rub their nose in your problem.
Probably not for medium urgency. I would do that if I was like, look at this mess you made. If they made a crappy decision and then later we realize all the risk, I think I would do that. I'd be like, why is this so bad? And I would be like, I would like to show you several risk reports. I would like to show you all the decisions you made in the decision log. I'd like to show you several status reports where you said you accepted this, and then show you exactly what's happening. That's the professional version of rubbing your sponsor's nose in it. But in terms of how to go to a sponsor before you're doing that, anytime you go to a sponsor, director, VP, C-level person, depending on what type of company you're working with, but somebody who cares about your project but doesn't know the nitty-gritty day-to-day, we're smart people, but we know that we can't just throw a problem at their feet and walk away. The best at escalation come with a few options for them to choose from.
Oh, gosh, yes. Yeah, that was a hard lesson for me very early on in my PM career, was escalating a problem to my boss and basically said, sir, we have this problem. And he looked at me dead in the eye and said, okay, how are you going to solve it? And I didn't have any answers. Don't be that guy or girl.
And if you're at a big problem, or feels like you've just got like 2 like bulls, like their horns are like locked together, or no, it's goats, right? 2 mountain goats, like big horns locked together. And so if you're stuck and you feel like you're just beating heads over and over again and you need a decision, you can let your sponsor know ahead of a big meeting, right? Like, because we're working on our relationship with them one-on-one. And it can be, and some of the best folks at it, I think, have always been chill about it, for lack of a better word. Normally I would be like, oh my gosh, we have to tell them that things aren't going well. But the best at this, they've approached it like, hey, sponsor, we're moving forward on this initiative. Things are going well. We have hit a decision point that we need for you to make. We'll have the decision point and options later today, but I wanted to give you a heads up that I'm escalating this to you because I need your input in order to make a decision that aligns with your vision for the project.
That's a really good point. That whole modeling technique, and that's, there's a lot you can talk about there in terms of communication, but if you model a behavior, if you're cool about it, they're more likely to mirror that and be cool as well.
Yeah, that's very true. I think that, and there'll be more on this in the next Crucial Conversations episode, but I think talking a little tentatively about things, I've heard some of my favorite project managers will be like, we're yellow. It's a greenish yellow, so I don't want to get anybody too stressed out. Or they'll be like, we're yellow trending orange. We're approaching a point. It's so stupid, but it was amazing how talking about your status in a way that you're confident about it. Like, we're yellow. Yes, we have a problem. We're trending to a yellowish green. It was stupid how calm that made the people in the room when this person presented their status report. I think about it all the time whenever I need to tell folks that my color has changed or the color of a project has changed. He was just so chill. And I envy it to this day, but I encourage you to try to take that technique when you're talking about changes in a project. Like, things are fine now. We could be trending up or down depending on how this goes.
I like that. Today, my status is yellow, trending green, like the leaves of a mighty oak tree swaying in the breeze on the crisp autumn morning. But, you talked about having that kind of early discussion. If you flip that around, it seems like you really do need to know your audience, because they may be the kind of person that they'll just stop right there and just try to demand a full explanation of full details and give you an earful. So would you think that that's just a matter of knowing your audience?
Yes. With the folks that I work with today, they're so busy. It's usually enough to say, hey, I'm going to need a decision from you on this project. We've run into something where either the technical solution isn't behaving like we thought it would. We've run into something where we're going to have to spend additional funds in order to meet the ask that you sent. Or scope, cost, and time. It's going to take longer than we thought it would. And that's worked well in my org because it's hard to get one-on-one time. Usually, here you go, I'll do this over instant messenger. I'll do it over Slack. I'm brave. And what can be helpful for me is that whether I get back a cool, can't wait to talk about it, or I'll get back 100 questions. And I'm like, all right, that even gives me an idea of what their expectations are for this issue, like how invested they are in it, what data points matter to them. And I know we've talked about this before, right? In the Giving Bad News episode, we talked about it's okay to say that you don't know and then provide them a time where you can provide that information. So if your sponsor says, question, and you were not prepared for question, then you can just follow that strategy we talked about in the Bad News episode and say, I totally hear you. I just wanted to give you a heads up, and we're actively working on gathering this information. Do you want it before the meeting? If you do, we can give you an update at 12:30 or whatever time, and we can have answers to all these questions by then. We're actively testing. It's just not done yet, right? And then they're like, okay, cool, and you can work through it. So I do think it's knowing your audience, but I also think it can be a little litmus test for how much this type of issue will make them panic.
That's good. I like that.
I like to think of escalation as eating your vegetables. It's just a healthy activity that you do to keep your project going strong.
What kind of vegetables?
I think high fiber vegetables is the type of that I think, because like too much fiber and it's like, woof, but no fiber and things don't go well either.
So like maybe broccoli.
I love some good broccoli.
For me, I think of escalation less in terms of vegetables and more in terms of military terms, honestly. So if I'm pinned down, hunkered down in my tiny, muddy project foxhole, taking fire, and issues are exploding overhead, and I'm trying to keep my team from harm, I'm going to call in for close air support from my sponsor. And when I do that, I'm going to give laser precise instruction on what I want them to blow the crap out of. So they only have to do it once because that may be the only chance I get. And also so I don't get blown up in the process. That's how I think of escalation.
I don't like to work in war zones. That's what I say to that.
I have to say, sometimes it feels like it, but
I mean, I've been on projects that feel like that. Like every day is a slog and there's a whole bunch of interference you have to run constantly and you're trying to keep morale up. Like I've worked projects like that. I think they suck. I try not to work them all the time, but I do think that it doesn't always have to be that bad to want to escalate, right? It can be that, you're driving your project truck down a road and another project truck is coming at you and you're both just driving 20 miles an hour, but there's only enough space for one truck, So is he going to pull over or are you going to pull over? Right? Like it doesn't always have to be a crazy urgent thing. It's more that we want to make sure that the folks that are at the pay grade that's accountable for these things are making the decisions for the project, and to think about ways of messaging less intense asks than the normal radioing in a sponsor and asking them to drop several bombs on the enemies of yourself and your forefathers, right? There's also a way to think about escalation that's like, hey, we're just coming up at a situation where there's two cars on a road and there's only room for one, but you need to make that decision. Which car would you like to have go? And it's fine if it's not my car, but it's time to pick which car goes down the road.
That's true. It is really not always that dramatic. What kind of can help make more sense of that is if you take a closer look at the roles, going back to PMI, because I have PMBOK on the brain right now.
Yeah.
As the project manager, you are engaged by your sponsor to get something done, something that they are paying for. And so they get to make the big calls, and maybe even some of the more moderate calls. So it's like if you hire someone to come out and do your yard, you are the sponsor in that situation and the yard person is the project manager. Now, let's say the grass in your front yard is dying. The yard guy or girl could or should escalate the fact that your sprinklers are broken, causing your grass to die. They should not just take it upon themselves to tear out all your grass and put in pink granite gravel because they thought that was the right thing to do.
Or alternatively, they shouldn't take it on themselves to dig up your yard and replace the sprinklers and then come to you with a bill that says, I fixed your sprinklers, right? I was paying you to mow the lawn. I did not expect you to fix the sprinklers. And while I appreciate what you wanted to do, it is not what I wanted, right? I think that definitely goes both ways, either changing the scope or adding additional cost that you didn't ask for. Those are the times whenever we want to go to the sponsor.
That's very true. So can we talk just a little bit more about when to escalate? Because often it doesn't feel like there is an easy answer to that. like the last example, I don't want the yard person to ask me how to trim every single tree because I'm thinking, well, you're the yard expert. I'm paying you to sort out the yard. So go trim the damn trees, So when is the right to escalate and when should you just figure out that stuff yourself?
Oh, this is one of those things where it's like you've internalized it so much. You're like, oh, how do I talk about my internal gauge for these things? I think for me, how it works is that in almost everything I do, I try to have those first 5 questions answered for myself from my sponsor. And I think to myself, hey, I have this thing that's popped up and it does not align with my first 5 questions, right? We've been asked to deliver a project solution that's turning into, like, for a one-time use thing, that's turning into an ongoing ops thing that we'll have to support for forever. Oh no, that wasn't what anybody asked for. We were supposed to just find a temporary solution, and now we've deployed this temporary solution to production and we're stuck with it. And it's funny because I have some coworkers that have started listening to this podcast, and I think all of them right now are like, she's talking about me. But here's the thing, it happens in all tech organizations across several teams. So it could be talking about anybody. But if I think about, a situation like that where it's like, oh no, these are competing things. We were supposed to find a fast one-time fix, and now we have an ongoing operational cost. That is something that my sponsor did not ask for, and he doesn't want. How do I get this resolved? I have to take it to him, right? I have to take it to my sponsor and say, you asked for a short-term solution. And with the way that we're going, we're going to end up supporting this for forever. You'll need a headcount dedicated for ongoing operations for this. You didn't budget for that. I didn't account for that. This is a new thing that's popped up as we've solutioned the project. What do you want to do, right? We could go forward with this operational thing and you'll have to take on the cost ongoing for forever. Or we could shut it down after we launch it. But if we do that, other people will already have started using this for running the business. Or we have to re-architect, which means it'll take us more time. And that's a situation that I, as the project manager, can't answer, right? If we go back to the yard example, you should know how to trim the damn tree, right? That should be, negotiating, schedules with your team, figuring out how to get them to work out an architecture, things like that. But if you're mowing the lawn and one of the trees is about to fall over on the house, you know how to cut down the tree as well and to cut it down safely so it doesn't land on the house. But it's not your decision whether or not that tree should be cut down. But you should raise it to the person owning the house as a tree expert and say, this is going to fall on you. Would you like me to handle this, or would you like it to fall on the house? Because they can accept the risk and let the insurance handle it when their house caves in. Maybe they want that. But it's up to you and your expertise to say, this is a big enough problem that'll impact your overall work livelihood or your expectations of the project. And now's the time to say, all right, this is going to be impacting in a way you care about. It's time to escalate.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. And what I think I'm hearing there is if something's going to happen in the project that is counter to the expectations of the sponsor.
Yeah.
And those expectations naturally are, of course, that the project is going to be within schedule and on time and deliver the scope. But there are expectations that go beyond that, too. And I guess you just, as a project manager, need to know your sponsor well enough to know what those expectations are.
Yeah. And if we go back to the first 5 questions, right, we talk about what success looks like, right? If success is onboarding a new group into a certain system, right? And we say, we did that. Also, I can't shut off their old system. Your sponsor's going to be like, that was the point. We talked about this. That's the point. I'm like, cool. I ran into this thing where I can't turn off the old system because XYZ, right? Bring them the options, talk about what that would be. But because you understand so clearly success, you can bring that to them and say, I have a situation that impacts our definition of success. I also think, kind of talking out loud here, that, something we haven't talked a lot about is checking in on that definition of success, that definition of done as the project goes on, right? Because if you learn it in the beginning and then you do your discovery, define your scope, and then you're working on implementing and you run into things like this, coming back to your sponsor and saying, just checking in on the definition of success and how we're tracking to that. Here's this thing that came up that I don't know where it fits in your definition of success. It's currently critical or it will end up critical to long-term success. So is this what you wanted? Just checking in.
I think that would be a good podcast. It's something I've had a lot of conversations lately It's something called benefits realization, and it's a different way of looking at projects. So we're used to looking at red, amber, green, am I on schedule, on time, and all these other parameters. But from an executive sponsor standpoint, they say, well, how's the project going? You say, well, I'm red, red, yellow, green. And they say, well, what does that mean? Am I going to have my thing I wanted on this date? That's what I'm paying for this project. That's all they care about are those benefits. We'll do a podcast on that.
It's funny. I'm working with a new project manager. She is great. I love her. And she's been with us like a month. So she's ramping up, asking a bunch of great questions. And she presented a status slide to me, and several of them were green. And I asked a bunch of questions about the green projects. And she had a moment where she was like, but they're green. And I was like, duh, of course I still want to know. And I think she was just sort of surprised, right? She was just voicing her surprise. I don't think she was like, I don't report on green stuff. I think it was more like, well, okay, we also care about green. Cool. Noted. And I thought about it, and it like came to me, in the shower where we have our most brilliant thoughts. But I was like, the reason why I care about even green projects as somebody who's a stakeholder in projects that are happening is because we're doing a project ultimately because some risk is red, right? Like we decided to pony up money to change our landscape of our company because we need to fix something, or we need to address an upcoming, market change, or we need to bring us up to the latest technology or whatever. So ultimately, something isn't working or working well enough for us today, and we'll have to do it better in the future. So even if it's green, yeah, I care because I need to know how close we are to moving overall from a company standpoint, the risk from red to yellow or from yellow to green. And it was an interesting moment. And I shared that with her. She's like, that makes perfect sense. I totally understand where you're coming from. And I'll make sure to update, in accordance with your expectations on seeing this project move forward. And I was like, oh, you're perfect. I love you. Thank you so much.
I'm definitely going to go write an episode on benefits realization.
Yeah.
So let me change gears on you here. So all we've been talking about is if you decide that you want to or you need to escalate. Have you ever had someone come to you and say, hey, you didn't do what I wanted, so I'm going to escalate?
Yes, that's actually the exact reason why I wanted to write this episode. I think anytime somebody says to you, like, you're in my way, I want you out of my way, I'm going to escalate. I think that is the perfect time to flex your improv muscles and and say, heck yeah, escalate on me. If some project manager, whoever this person is, screw them. But if they think that your project is lower priority than their project, encourage them to bring it up with your sponsors and stakeholders and let people with higher pay grades decide, right? I'm usually confident about my project because I'm like, nah, I know I'm number one. I know I'm number one on the totem pole. I'm not really worried. But if we get all this information from the other party about what their project is doing, what their goals are, and how I'm blocking them, we can be really clear to our sponsors about how we can assist them with trying to get their project to move forward if it is also a priority for the company. And if we assist them, how will it impact us? But I think that if somebody else says, I'm going to escalate on you, like, I don't always think it's bad to say, oh, no, don't, we'll work it out. It's blah, blah, blah. Like, if this other project manager is honestly just trying to be the CEO of their project. They're looking out for their own scope and timeline and resources, right? So they're just doing the best they can. And if there's a legit, like, 2 cars going down the street and the only foreseeable way we could work together is like 1 car on the street, then bring it to your stakeholders to let them decide who should get to go, who should pull over and who should drive on, right? Like, that's what they're there for.
I ate my broccoli today.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's exactly right. And that's the kind of decision that is the responsibility of the sponsors and the executive team. That's their job, is to decide how they're going to prioritize work for your team and other teams.
And something that I run into, I work for a very large organization. It is really hard to do enormous cross-functional risk prioritization, go-to-market prioritization, brand prioritization. Like, it's really hard to just like matrix all the requirements. It's so much easier within your own vertical to say, this is the most important thing. So whenever you do run into those cross-vertical things, it's like, yeah, let the people that are smarter than us, that are paid to be smarter than us, decide what we really need to focus on. Let them decide where the money should be spent. Let them argue about which resources should stand down. Bring it up as high as they need to go so that they can figure that out. That's what they're paid for. And we can't figure that out. There's too many matrix dependencies. So we'll work at what we can, the solutions we can with us and the other party to see if we can find anything, but ultimately bring that decision up to your sponsors to let them know.
I don't necessarily think they're smarter than us, though.
I have to tell myself that sometimes. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know what you're saying. All right. So, Kate, if we go back to something you said earlier, I got to be honest about something. And you are going to gasp in horror when I say this.
Okay.
But this is not the first time. A minute ago, you mentioned this yes and from improv. And I know it's an improv thing and you were a total improv nerd, but I have no idea what yes and is. What is that?
Oh, I can't. That's funny. No companies ever made you go to improv training to be a better collaborator, because companies are huge on that. And it's also a big source of revenue for improv companies to be able to like support their business. So I'm surprised that you haven't had one.
No idea what that is.
Okay. So improv is, I would call it a performance art. That's really snobby of me. And I'm sorry, because most people know it as a bunch of white guys making like off-color blue jokes about things. So the way that I've done it, it's been performance art. Yes, that's what I said, flipping my hair back. But what I mean by performance art, you do improv on stage, and it's built out of collaboration. And the premise of improv is that you can make a whole play, a whole show, a whole scene out of nothing. But the only way to build things with people is by agreeing with them and building off what each other have created. So in a scene on stage in improv, somebody might come out and say, gosh, it's beautiful on the moon tonight. So this person has said that probably you're on the moon. Either you're on the real moon or a place called Moon or something like that. And it's beautiful. So they feel like this is a great place to be right now. If you were to come out on stage and be a part of this scene with this person who started the show, you might say, and I've always wanted to pass off my belongings on a night like this, right? And because that seems like that could be the next sentence in the scene. So you're creating, and also, right, I've added that I'm probably an old woman or an old person, and I have some sort of connection with the other person on stage. I'm looking at what they provided and said, I'll add something to this to help. The thing about yes and is that the other person shouldn't say, no, young 4-year-old Kate, what you're here to do is to play fetch with me or whatever, right? Like that doesn't help make a beautiful scene. Then you're just watching conflict play out, right? And the other person's like, no, I'm an old woman. And then you're like, this is not fun for anybody, because nobody likes to watch conflict. We deal with conflict all the time. Conflict is stressful, hard, tension, boring, forever. It's so much more delightful to watch something be agreed to and to create something together and to enjoy the weirdness of the moment and be excited about what being open to possibility can do. And a very short phrase to describe that is yes and, right? So if we wanted to do a yes and exercise, this would be the one that I would pick. So let's plan a parade, and you're going to say what's in the parade, and then I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to add something else in the parade. And then you're going to say yes, and add something else to the parade. And we will see what type of parade we make based off this silly little exercise. So are you ready?
I think so. I'm a little scared here.
It's going to be great, because I'm going to support you, because I'm going to agree with whatever you say. So there's no wrong answers.
Okay.
All right. So Kim, we're going to have a parade.
I love parades.
So say yes, and after the and, add something to the parade.
Yes, and there will be a giant inflatable copy of the PMBOK.
Yes, and there's going to be a giant pencil to go with it so you can take the giant PMBOK test.
Oh, yes, and Santa will be there, and he'll bring risks for everyone.
Yes, and my sponsor is going to ride in on a giant dog, and he's going to be so excited to see how this beautiful risk log that I've made for him looks like.
Yes, and he will have a bag full of broccoli that he will throw to all the children as he passes by.
Yes, and Darth Vader will look on from the Death Star so proud of his young Kim Essendrup and all of the times he's mentioned him.
Yes, and he said, it is good.
And that is our parade.
I like it. That's good.
And what a stupid thing. I hope our listeners like that, because it's the dumbest thing we've ever done. But at a very high level, if you take that type of lesson back to something like somebody telling you, I don't like what you did, I'm going to escalate. You can say, yeah, I think you should escalate. I think that's great. And what I'll do is
I'll bring this discussion that we had to my sponsor. I'll work out with a team if there's any way we can have options to support you. But I totally think that's a great idea. That's exactly what we should do, right? And then they're almost caught off guard because instead of being like, I'll bend, do whatever you want, or no, you can go stuff it. You've agreed with them and created a partnership that they didn't think was going to exist in a conflicting situation. And also, it takes this tension out of the room to agree with people. You just take all that huff and puff right out of their sails.
That's really good. It feels very creative, too, even in just that exercise, because I'm listening to what you're going to say, and I'm trying to find a way to feed off of that instead of trying to come up with something in my own head.
Right.
And it's creative. It's pretty cool. I like that.
Yeah, that's a technique that you can use when you're stuck on some part of your project and you need to figure out a creative way. You know, the sponsor comes back and says, nope, these solutions don't work. Back to the drawing board. And you go back to the drawing board and you're like, all right, everything's on the table. Throw out your inflatable PMBOK ideas because we got to get creative. And so instead of saying no to what everybody says, then instead you can be like, yep, inflatable PMBOK. What else could we do? Right?
Wow. Well, thank you for my improv lesson this morning.
Yeah. I'm sure eventually we can do an episode on improv. I can't believe how lovingly I talked about it. I haven't performed in a long time.
I have a new appreciation for your project management ethos now that I've heard a little bit of that.
It's like eating your vegetables, Kate.
I do. I mean, the way that I think about escalation now, it's like something you want to make sure that you're doing all the time, but at the right measured amount. You know, I don't think you never want to take an extreme diet and only vegetable, only escalation, like only broccoli in this really extreme example. You know, like there's a variety of vegetables to eat that all offer different nutrients. So we would never only eat one single type of vegetable. We would never only escalate. But I try to keep the people that I'm working with involved when there's things that come up, but I try to also phrase it in ways that help them understand, you know, hey, we're in this together and I'm still handling it. I take ownership language of the escalation so that they will not be caught off guard, just like I said earlier, when it comes up. But it just served me so well. It served me so well in my career.
There was something I said in there, which it's funny. I didn't realize I was thinking about this that far back because it's something I talk a lot about now. And I said something to the effect that escalating helps your sponsor make decisions whether they want to or not. And so that's a lot of what escalation is, you know, sometimes you're making their problem your problem when really it needs to be their problem. And I think I really started thinking a lot about that after the conversation with Norlander, because that was something you and Norlander had spoken about, was making other people's problems their own.
Yeah, I do think there is this like delicate balance in figuring out who owns what. And what I think is the most interesting is I do think I struggled from it from a promotion point of view. I think there's people here who maybe don't need to get promoted, or maybe they're not worried about that. Like they're at a spot where they feel good. But I was stuck at this like middle, and not even middle manager. I wasn't even a senior PM for a long time, even though I was handling millions of dollars in projects, very big project risks, addressing big customer problems. Like I was the only person in the room who was like 2 levels beneath everybody else in the room as me. And I was like, why am I stuck here? Why am I capable of handling all this stuff? Like there's none of my peers are in this room. You guys are my peers and you're 2 levels above me. Like this doesn't make any sense. So what I think is just so interesting is that clearly it wasn't really a problem in how I was making sure work got done, but there was a problem in the perception of how work was getting done. And then I had to shift into this other way of being. And I think that was what created the burnout. So, you know, maybe don't listen to me. Maybe keep doing what you're doing and find people who are better, who want to hear how you handle things. But I have taken this way of being forward into like new clients and other projects that I get. And it works well, you know, to be able to talk about it like you're in it together. Like, hey, this thing has come up. I'm working on this. Just want to give you a heads up. You know, we'll see if there's something you got to do about it. You know, after I have this expectation setting conversation with the client, with the vendor, with the problem person, whoever it is.
Yeah, it's good growth for me because I've always been in that radical ownership mindset of, no, it's mine. I get it. I got it. Don't worry about it. I'll figure it out. The house is burning down. No, I'll figure it out. I'll put it out. And hopefully becoming a little bit wiser and realizing, no, you know what? There's somebody paid to make these decisions and to help out. This is their project they're investing in. Let them come in, let them help. You have to carry all this stuff on your own.
Totally. I also like to talk about how they made these choices. You know, they made those choices. So let them live with the consequences of their choices. You know,
Yep.
You and I, Kim, just came from planning for going to a conference. And for our listeners, this is silly, but like for us to buy the tickets, it's a pretty big, we don't really make a ton or much money at all from doing this podcast, just to be clear. And so like dropping something like a couple grand on tickets would be eating up a lot of the extra cash we would have on hand. And so what we decided to do is accept the risk that we may not get everything that we want, and that we would also, if we need to get what we want, pay the premium for the tickets at the conference when we're there. We decided that. And so when we get there, if we're unhappy with what we have and unhappy with the price that we're paying, tough cookies. Like, we decided that, you know, we'll have to hold up our own decision log at ourselves if we're mad about it, because we made this problem for ourselves. You know, we made those choices that will cost us, if we don't like how it goes, you know, we have a plan, but it'll cost us, you know, a lot of extra cash in terms of the overall budget for what we're doing. But we made that choice. So we have to eat it if we need to make the choice in the future.
We have no one to escalate that to.
I know. We just have to sit there and point fingers directly at each other equally. Be like, you did this. And then you tell me I did this. And I say, you did this. Yeah. The thing that I did laugh about was because you were teaching the PMP course, you were like, you have to start your integrated change control. And I was like, God, has anybody ever called it that? Could anybody even call it integrated change control now? Right now, this is it, like the time of, you know, buzzwords and innovative talk. Integrated change nobody's doing integrated change control now. They might have a change review board, they might have a scope meeting, but I'm like, nobody's calling it integrated change control. That made me giggle. I bet that's not what it's called in this current version of the PMBOK.
I think they carved that out 2 versions ago.
Yeah. I was like, wow, it really does change.
Yes, and?
Did you like your improv lesson?
I love this thing you taught me from your improv time, this yes and perspective and approach.
What's so funny is like people who learn like the cliff notes of improv, they show up going, yes, and then they like continue. They're like, I'm doing it. And it's like, it is the foundational tenet of like making good collaboration. But there are people who are like, I read that, I know it. And now I just say yes and I live here now. Like, I've never taken a step beyond it. So like there was a leader that I worked with and I could tell he went to one improv class, and like you would be like, I want to do this thing. He'd be like, yes, and the budget is constrained. Like, he was so proud of himself for his yes anding. I'd be like, we're kind of stuck here. Yes, and we're looking at solutions. He would literally say it with that pause. So how often have you used it since we talked about it?
Not much. I forgot about it, but now I'm reminded because I listened to it again.
Good. I hope you're just as awkward. Yes. And I'm even doing like a 30-degree shoulder shimmy.
Shoulder roll.
Yeah. It's like, yes. And because like you want to pivot the conversation away. That's how I saw him use it, as like a leader in tech.
I'm intent. I'm going to find the most awkward place and time to use that. And I'm going to use it. And I'm going to tell you about it after.
Ah, very good. The thing I also laughed at is I just can't, guys, I can't get enough of Crucial Conversations. I need somebody from that company to pay me because I never stop talking about that stupid book. My sister is going through a time with somebody in her life right now. And I was like, okay, so in Crucial Conversations, we go back to what do I want for myself, what do I want for others, and what do I want for the relationship? Like I quote that crap all the time. I can't believe how much I quote Crucial Conversations constantly. I'm like, it's the only book you need to read. So, hey guys, tell me if you've read it and tell me how many times I had to say it to get you to read it. Because I reference it all the time. It's the only book you need to read on talking to people. Genuinely.
I reference it in all my Raid Log practitioner classes too.
I bet, like there she is again, hanging out, being correct, being a useful tool. You're going to use it for the rest of your career.
And that's our show. Thanks for listening. If you liked our show, please leave a review and a comment on iTunes or wherever you get our podcast. Your review really does mean a lot. And if you want to check out our membership site and all of our cool content there, you can check that out at pmhappyhour.com/membership. If you want to talk to us directly about project management, PM consulting, training, or whatever, our contact info is on our website under About Your Hosts, or you can just hit us up on our Facebook site at PM Happy Hour. You'll find we're really pretty easy to get a hold of there. And that's it for today. Good luck with your projects, and we hope to catch you again at the next PM Happy Hour. Cheers.